right, y'all, welcome back to the show. It's Anti-War Radio on Chaos 95.9 in Austin, Texas, streaming live worldwide on the internet at chaosradioaustin.org and at antiwar.com/radio. And our first guest on the show today is George Maschke from antipolygraph.org. And the article I'm looking at here says DOJ rationalizes away polygraph's failure to catch alleged Anthrax killer Bruce Ivins. Welcome back to the show, George. How are you doing?
Very well. Thanks, Scott. Good to be with you.
Well, I'm glad to have you here. So let's talk about this Ivins case here. Obviously, you're focused on a very narrow segment of it. The FBI recently officially closed the case and released their final report, and they had some things in there to say about Anthrax accusee Bruce Ivins and how he did on his so-called lie detector tests. So what do you know here? What happened?
Yeah, well, as the FBI was investigating the Anthrax mailings of 2001, they asked scientists at the U.S. Army Infectious Diseases Research Institute at Fort Detrick, Maryland, to take lie detector tests to screen them before they could participate in the investigation. And there was some concern, that it might have been someone, with access to a U.S. strain of, I think it's called the Ames strain of the anthrax bacterium. So, they polygraphed Ivins, among the others, and he passed, and he cooperated with the investigation. And now, after he became a suspect, they say, oh, well, yeah, he passed because he used countermeasures to fool the polygraph. But somehow the fact that, or the allegation that he used countermeasures to pass only came to light after he became the sole suspect.
Funny how that works.
Yeah, I mean, it's I think Monday morning quarterbacking, sort of going back and coming to the conclusion that supports the investigative theory.
Well, this has often been my problem with the FBI is that, when they're not just, framing up Richard Jewell for Eric Rudolph's bombing at the Olympic Park or some other, letting the Unabomber get away with it for, half a generation or more or whatever. When they actually are building a case, rather than chiseling away at a block of marble until only the truth is left, they grab their clay and they start building a case. And so if they want to accuse you, George Maschke, of something, they will find a way to build a case to say that you're the guy that they're looking for. And it's the difference between induction and deduction on the most basic level of logical thinking. Like we were here in the Dark Ages or something.
Well, there are indeed other aspects of the anthrax investigation that, as a layperson, I find troubling. There are others who could speak to those concerns better than me. But, you'll find there are scientists.
Well, I mean, the example you used right there. Here, he passed his polygraph test, and then they decided he's the one who did it. So they went back and looked at his polygraph test, and they said what? Oh, look, he was deceiving us.
Yes, and in fact, they assert that he showed classic signs of polygraph countermeasures use. But there's a problem with that assertion, which is that there are no such classic signs of countermeasure use. There is not a single book chapter or journal article that explains how to reliably detect polygraph countermeasures.
Okay, now there are classic countermeasures, right? Because I saw you actually on Penn and Teller's BS there, and they had this other guy on there who was a former polygrapher and who now goes around telling people how to beat them.
Sure, there are classic things that are well-known techniques. For example, doing mental arithmetic while the control questions are being asked, or slowly biting down on the side of your tongue. But no polygraph operator has ever demonstrated the ability to reliably detect such countermeasures, and they don't create telltale charts, that where it's obvious that countermeasures are being used. So I think that the FBI's assertions in this case really demand scrutiny, and that those polygraph charts and the review ought to be publicly released so they can be independently scrutinized.
Mm-hmm. Well, how suspicious is that? I mean, these guys just, I guess, have no problem whatsoever in going back and just revising whatever their conclusions are to fit whatever they want their conclusions to be. It's about as simple as that. I mean, you're telling me there's no such thing. You cannot define what is a classic countermeasure for a polygraph machine, and yet someone in the FBI made up such a term just so he could say that this guy used them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it sure looks like they're, reached pretty far to dismiss his original polygraph results, and of course that's important for their investigative theory and for their continued use of calligraphy. It raises the question, hey, if the guy who they say mailed the Anthrax letters, if he could beat the polygraph, well, why are we relying on polygraphs at all? And so their explanation seems to be, back then, polygraph operators weren't trained how to detect these classic signs, but now they are, so everything's cool. Don't worry about it. Trust us.
Well, you mentioned in your article here, too, that they did the exact same thing with Aldrich Ames, the Russian spy or Soviet spy, I forget exactly, or maybe both, who repeatedly passed his polygraphs, and then after he was actually busted for other reasons. I guess they caught him on camera stealing, or maybe that was Robert Hansen. Anyway, after they decided this guy really was a Soviet spy, then they went back and looked at his polygraphs and decided that he was being deceptive.
There were clear signs of deception in the charts. It just the polygraph examiner failed to see them. Yeah. So,
well, now there are a couple other holes in the FBI's theory that you've pointed out here in your article. Again, it's DOJ rationalizes away polygraph's failure to catch alleged anthrax killer Bruce Ivins at antipolygraph.org. And let's see, one of these was that they said, he was under the influence of psychotropic drugs. That was in the recent report, and that maybe that was the reason that they had failed, so-called, the first time?
They suggested that may have been the case. I mean, they didn't explicitly say it, but they raise it as, he was under the influence of drugs. But
their own reports contradict that, right?
Right. I looked through all of the FBI reports looking for any references to the polygraph. So a whole slew of documents were released on last Friday afternoon, to bury it in the news cycle. But I looked through them, and it turns out that Ivins was questioned about his polygraph, and he said, one, that he didn't do any research on polygraphy or look up anything on how to fool the test. And he had stopped taking his antidepressant, anti-anxiety medication 48 to 72 hours before the polygraph. And he offered to provide blood and or urine specimens at the time of the test to prove he was not medicated. So the medications he had been prescribed, that's a non-issue with regard to his polygraph results.
Mm-hmm. Well, and then you say that there was further evidence that he, in fact, had not researched how to pass a polygraph test. Now, how do you prove that negative there?
Okay, well, it's not conclusive proof, but it strongly suggests that someone who knows him, whose name was redacted from the report, was questioned about Ivins, and the FBI agent's summary of the interview says that Ivins spoke about the polygraph he took for the investigation, and that he passed some questions but failed the one about taking stuff from work. Now, that's the thing. The question about taking stuff from work is what's called a control question. It's used. It's not something they're really concerned about, but they try to make you think they're concerned about. And what they want to do is they assume everyone's taking stuff from work, right? But they want to make you think, if you take stuff from work, you're the sort of person who might take Anthrax from work and mail it to Senator Daschle. So they try to tell you that this control question is as important, to convince you that it's as important as the main questions, but they really assume everyone's lying. So when you say no, you never took stuff from work, they assume you're not telling the truth about that. So if you react more strongly to the question about, sending the Anthrax letters than the question about taking stuff from work, then you fail the test, and you'd be subjected to a post-test interrogation. But if your strongest reaction is to the question about taking stuff from work, it suggests to them that, well, you're more concerned about taking stuff from work than you are about, having mailed the anthrax letter, so you must